In the days long after the flood of Noah, when the sons of Shem had begun to build cities in the east and trade had returned to the land, there was a mountain forgotten by many. Its name was Arak Nahor, and it stood on the edge of the wilderness between the land of Asher and the hills of Elam. Few traveled near Arak Nahor, for the shepherds spoke of strange winds that sang like voices, and of dreams that came upon those who camped near its base. Old men warned, "That is the mountain of tongues, cursed and buried beneath the judgment of the Most High." But none knew why, until the day the earth trembled. It happened in the 3rd year of King Elion's reign in Shinar. A quake, neither large nor small, shook the northern side of Arak Nahor. Stones loosened, and a part of the cliffside split open, revealing an ancient cave sealed by time. The shepherd who saw it was a man named Joram, a descendant of Arphaxad. He was no prophet, only a keeper of goats. Yet the moment he saw the dark opening, he fell to his knees and covered his face. "I have seen the breath of God," he whispered. He left the mountain that night and walked for 3 days to reach the city of Akkad, where he told the scribes what he had found. But the scribes laughed at him, save one, Ezri, an aged priest of the Most High, who had once studied the old scrolls in Ur before the Tower of Babel had been scattered. Ezri looked at Joram with serious eyes. "You say the mountain opened, and behind it, a cave with carvings upon the entrance?" "Yes," Joram said, trembling. "The stones have writing I have never seen. Not Hebrew, not Akkadian, nor the tongues of Kemet." Ezri grew pale. "It cannot be," he muttered. "It was buried before the days of Babel." He rose and summoned 3 others, men of wisdom, 2 from the house of Shem, and 1 a convert from the tribe of the Kenites. They took supplies, fasted 3 days, and journeyed to the cave. When they reached the mountain, the winds indeed sang, and the shadows danced as if the rocks remembered what the world had forgotten. They entered the cave. What they saw would change the course of the ages. The walls were covered with symbols, not letters, not shapes, but living marks that shimmered faintly even in the dark. And on the center wall was a tablet carved from stone that was not of this world, black like obsidian, yet warm to the touch. Ezri placed his hand upon the stone. The cave filled with sound, a whisper of voices, a hum like many waters, a language no man had heard since Eden. He fell to the ground. "This is the tongue of the first man," he said, tears falling from his eyes. "This is the speech Adam spoke before sin, before the confusion of Babel, before the world broke into many voices." The others trembled. A light came from the tablet, not fire, not sun, but a glory that reminded Ezri of what had once been lost. And so began their mission, to read what Adam wrote, to remember what heaven had hidden, and to decide whether mankind was ready to hear again the voice of Eden. Ezri and the 3 wise men stood in silence before the glowing tablet. The air inside the cave was thick, not with dust, but with power, as if the voice of God still echoed off the ancient stones. None dared speak, for their hearts knew they were in a place not made by man, but preserved by the will of the Almighty. Ezri slowly opened the satchel at his side and took out a scroll and a quill made from the feather of an eagle. He bowed before the tablet. "O Lord," he whispered, "grant that I may understand the tongue you taught the dust when you breathed into it life." The moment he spoke, a soft wind stirred inside the sealed cave. Then something strange happened. One of the glowing symbols, shaped like a coiled river with wings, detached from the stone and floated gently into the air. It hovered before Ezri's face. The others watched, breathless. Ezri stared at it, and then, almost without thought, he spoke the sound it made in his mind. Alepha. As he said the word aloud, a trembling filled the floor. The symbol pulsed with light and then dissolved into Ezri's chest, as if it had entered his very soul. Ezri fell backward. The others rushed to him, thinking he was dying. But he raised his hand. "I am well," he said, "but the word, it is alive. It is not like our words which pass from tongue to ear and die. This word has no death in it. It burns within me still." The youngest of the 3, Amiel the Kenite, asked, "What does it mean?" Ezri looked toward the stone wall again. "I saw in my mind when I spoke it, a garden full of light. I saw the first man walking beside the Creator, speaking this word as he named the beasts. Alepha. It means breath of beginning. It was the first sound Adam spoke. The others bowed low. This was no ordinary discovery. This was the root of all language, the spark that lit the tongues of every tribe and nation. That night they did not sleep. They built a small altar outside the cave and offered incense of frankincense and myrrh, that their work may not offend heaven, for they knew they stood on sacred ground. Inside the cave the tablet remained. The symbols no longer glowed with the same brightness, but one by one, as Ezri stood before it, the words called to him. Each word he spoke entered him, not just as knowledge but as vision. He saw creation. He saw animals called by name and responding. He saw rivers form when spoken to. He saw Adam and Eve speaking to the earth, and the earth blooming beneath their feet. It was not just a language, Ezri said. It was authority. Every word had power. Every sound shaped the world. Amiel trembled. Then why was it lost? Ezri's eyes dimmed. Because man sinned. When Adam fell, the language broke. And when Babel rose, it was shattered. But this, he said, looking again at the tablet, this is what remains. What the flood could not wash away. What the curse could not silence. Then he looked at the others. We are not just discovering an old tongue. We are touching the voice that once walked with God. But something stirred deeper in the mountain. The words remembered. And not all of them were kind. Some were names never meant to be spoken again. For 7 days, Ezri and the 3 wise men remained at the mountain of Arachnihur. Each day a new word would rise from the tablet. Each night they would record its sound, its image, and the visions it brought. The language of Adam was unfolding before them, not in full sentences, but in sacred syllables that seemed to carry the weight of heaven and earth. Some words brought visions of rivers and stars. Others opened understanding of animals, wind, and the changing seasons. Even the smallest word felt like a piece of divine breath. But on the 7th day, the cave grew colder. The wind outside stopped. The birds ceased their song. Even the insects hid. Something had shifted. Ezri stood before the tablet as usual, expecting the next word. He raised his hands and whispered the prayer. Speak, O root of Eden, and let the will of the Lord be known. But this time 2 symbols rose from the stone. Interlocked, dark red in color, unlike the others. They shimmered like blood under firelight. Ezri hesitated. He turned to the others. These are not like the rest. They are heavy with grief and something darker. Amiel, who had been the most eager to learn, said, Perhaps it is a name. Ezri frowned. Yes, but not a name of man. A name of something else. Something before the garden fell. The others looked at him. You must speak it, said Melchi of Shalem. The language is unfolding as it was meant to. Ezri turned back to the symbols. He took a breath and spoke the name. Shemaitael. The sound echoed unnaturally across the walls. Then the light in the cave flickered and went out. Suddenly a voice not their own whispered from the darkness. Who calls the name that heaven has buried? The men fell to the ground. The cave pulsed as if alive. Wind rushed inward, though the entrance remained still. The glowing tablet dimmed. The ground shook. Then a shadow formed on the far wall. Not solid, not spirit, but a memory of something ancient and angry. Ezri gasped. It is one of the Watchers, he said, trembling. One of the sons of God who fell in the days of Enoch. The vision grew darker. This Shemaitael had been a guardian in Eden once, set to watch the borders of the garden with a flaming gaze. But he rebelled. Tempted by the secrets of the first language, he had tried to shape worlds of his own. God struck him down and cast his name into silence. And now Ezri had spoken it. The shadow hissed. The tongue of Adam was sealed for a reason. Not all words bring life. Suddenly the red symbols shattered into dust. The shadow vanished. The glow of the cave returned slowly. Ezri rose, pale and shaking. He looked at the others and said with grave warning, We must be careful. The language is not only for healing, it holds the memory of rebellion. Each word is a door, and not all doors should be opened. They left the cave that night and did not return until morning. They fasted, prayed, and burned incense, asking God to forgive them for what had been awakened. But the seed had been planted, and deep within the mountain, something had heard the name. Though the memory of Shemetel lingered in their hearts like ash upon the tongue, Ezri and the others returned to the cave at dawn. The mountain winds had changed again, no longer angry but still, silent, as if waiting. Ezri approached the ancient tablet carefully, humbled by the power it carried. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he knelt and whispered a prayer, not in Hebrew, but in the sacred tongue they had begun to relearn. He used only the words that had brought light, creation, peace. Alepha, Bariah, Lumina, Eshdor, Zerah. Beginning, creation, light, fire of the path, seed. The cave seemed to sigh. The weight of the previous day lifted like morning fog, and the next word rose from the stone, a gentle spiral, glowing with a soft blue hue. Ezri did not touch it. This time he listened first. In the stillness of the cave, the word spoke through him, not to him. He whispered its sound. Rephanah. As soon as the word left his lips, a light filled the chamber, not blinding, but warm. The four men gasped. Ezri's skin glowed faintly, and his old bones, long aching with age, began to straighten. Then something miraculous happened. Melki, the oldest of them, who had walked with a limp for years, stumbled forward. "My leg," he cried. "The pain, it is gone." Ezri looked at Amiel, whose arm bore a burn from a desert fire months before. The skin healed before their eyes, new as a child's. Rephanah, Ezri said again, stunned. "It means healing, not just of body, but of soul." They bowed together in awe. That night, the group stayed in silence around the altar outside the cave. No one dared speak of the miracle loudly. This word was not for the market or the scribe's scroll. It was holy. Ezri wrote in his scroll, "This word heals not only what is broken in flesh, but restores the cracks of the spirit. It is the balm Adam once used to comfort the beasts, and Eve to calm the vines after the fall. It is the sound of peace before sorrow." He paused, then wrote again, "Perhaps this tongue is not only for remembrance, but for restoration." The next morning, they decided to test the power of the word outside the cave. Ezri and Amiel walked down into the valley to a small shepherd's village. There, a child lay dying from fever. The villagers knew Ezri as a holy man and begged him to pray. Ezri did not speak the child's language, but as he laid his hands upon her and whispered, "Rephanah," the child's breathing slowed, her color returned, and by sunrise she sat up and smiled. Word spread quickly. The villagers called it a miracle. Ezri knew the truth. It was the tongue of the garden, living again. But with every word they recovered, he grew more cautious. He began marking them in 3 colors: white for creation and peace, gold for power and dominion, red for danger and memory of the fall. He sealed the red ones with wax, because he understood now what the cave had tried to teach them. The language of Eden is not a toy. It is not a tool. It is a key to the door of the divine, and keys, if misused, can unlock disaster. In the shadows of Arak Nihar, another word began to stir, a word neither white nor gold nor red, a word that remembered the serpent. The days passed with reverence. More words revealed themselves, words of harvest, of rain, of harmony. The scrolls Ezri kept grew longer, now sealed and protected in layers of linen. He recorded each word, its meaning, the vision it gave, and the color it was marked with. But he noticed a change. The deeper they went into the cave, the darker it became, not in light, but in presence. It was not evil exactly, not at first, but there was a weight pressing against them, as if the cave itself resisted their steps. One morning, Amiel, the youngest, did not rise. He was found kneeling near the tablet, his eyes wide and full of tears, lips trembling. Ezri approached him. "Amiel, what have you seen?" The young man shook his head slowly. "A word rose in the night. It came to me while I slept. I didn't speak it. I swear it, Ezri. I only heard it." Ezri sat beside him. "What was the word?" he asked gently. Amiel looked around fearfully and whispered, "Nakazur." Ezri's face turned pale. His hands trembled. He knew the root of that sound. Nachash, the word for serpent. Azar, meaning counsel or whisper. Serpent's counsel, Ezri muttered. The word of temptation. That day they fasted. They covered the cave entrance with stones and prayed beneath the sun. The four men debated whether the cave should be sealed forever. This tongue is holy, said Melchi, but even Eden had a serpent. Perhaps this word is the fruit we were never meant to bite. But Amiel, still trembling, said something they had not expected. It spoke to me. Ezri's eyes narrowed. The word? He nodded. It told me of power, not just healing, not just creation, but the ability to command, to bend others, to control minds and will. And I saw a vision of a tree, but the roots were snakes, and from it came a tongue of silver and eyes without soul. Ezri clutched his chest. The serpent had not died in Eden. It had waited for the return of the language, for the return of a voice that could speak it again. He turned to the others and said firmly, "We must seal this part of the language. Bury it as heaven buried the name of Shemaytael. This is not a word of Adam. It is a word that twisted his tongue." But it was too late. That night Amiel disappeared. They searched the mountain for hours. No sign of him. No footprints. No broken branch. No cry. It was as if the wind had swallowed him whole. Only one thing remained. Carved into the side of the altar stone was the word, Nak-Azur, and beneath it, in smaller script, the message, "He who holds the serpent's tongue will never be ruled again." Ezri wept. "I should have stopped when we first saw the red symbols. I thought the word was holy only. I forgot that the enemy also walked in Eden." The remaining two, Ezri and Melchi, sealed the cave that night, with stones and pitch, with prayer and weeping. Ezri buried the scrolls in a bronze chest and marked it with 3 seals. The mark of Adam, for creation. The mark of the tower, for division. The mark of the Lamb, for redemption. Then he prayed, "O Lord, let no man open this chest unless he comes with fear and truth. Let no tongue speak these words unless his heart is clean. Let the serpent's whisper be silenced once more." But as they departed the mountain, a whisper followed them through the trees. "I spoke to Eve once. I will speak again." Ezri and Melchi returned from the mountain changed men. Their faces were aged by more than time, and their eyes held a weight too deep for speech. The world below, the cities, the markets, the songs of harvest, felt like shadows compared to the glory and terror they had seen within the cave. They carried no treasure, no gold, no silver, only the bronze chest, sealed and bound in sacred cloth. Inside it rested the scrolls, the sacred symbols, and the words of power. Some were luminous and gentle. Others were dangerous, sleeping like coiled fire, waiting for a breath to awaken them. When they reached the land of Shinar, they avoided the cities. Instead, they found refuge among the tents of a quiet people. Descendants of Eber, a righteous remnant who feared the God of Shem and still remembered the stories of Babel and Eden. There, Ezri shared only part of the truth. He taught the people the white words, those that healed, those that blessed crops, those that brought peace between quarreling families. The people called them the words of the garden. And soon Ezri was known as a prophet and teacher, though he never claimed the title. Melchi, however, grew silent. He often sat alone by the river at night, staring at the stars. "The serpent still speaks," he once said to Ezri, "not through hissing, but through men." Ezri nodded. He too had sensed it. Though they had sealed the cave, something had followed them. Not Amiel, whose body had never been found, but the influence. In dreams, in small things. Men who crave power more than peace. Men who asked, "Can these words bring dominion over others?" Ezri never taught them, but he feared they might seek the cave for themselves. One day a stranger arrived from the south. He wore fine robes and bore a silver ring carved with a sun and serpent entwined. He called himself Hadron, a sage from the land of Cush. He asked to learn the tongue Ezri spoke. "I've heard whispers," he said, "a language older than Babel, words that bend nature and command wind." Ezri lied. "I know no such tongue." But Hadron smiled coldly. "Lies do not hide well under heaven." That night Esri dreamed of Amiel, his face pale, his mouth open, but instead of a voice, a serpent slithered out. It whispered the word Nakazur, and Esri woke in a cold sweat. Esri and Melki knew then, the knowledge could not remain near men of ambition. So under the cover of darkness, they journeyed one last time. This time not to the cave, but to a valley of stone deep in the west. There in the valley of Heth, they buried the bronze chest beneath a tree older than the flood, whose roots were white and bark whispered in the wind. They marked the place with no sign, only a prayer. Let this tongue sleep until the earth is ready. Let the garden's voice wait for the gardener. And they left. Esri lived 5 more years. He never returned to the mountain or spoke the hidden words again. When he died, Melki washed his body with oil and buried him in peace. Melki vanished soon after. Some say he wandered east to guard the cave once more. Others say he was taken by the one who walks among stars. But the cave remained sealed. The chest remained hidden, and the tongue of Eden fell silent again. For now, generations passed, kings rose and fell, empires crumbled into dust. The story of the mountain and the cave faded into legend, whispered only by wandering tribes and half-forgotten scrolls tucked away in dim corners of desert temples. But the word never died. It waited. Buried beneath soil and stone, the tongue of Eden remained, like a sleeping lion in the heart of the earth. Silent, sacred, sealed. Until the day a boy named Asahel heard a voice in the wind. Asahel was a shepherd, much like Joram had been generations before. He lived in the land of Kedem, near the distant western cliffs beyond the valley of Heth. He was no scholar, no prophet, just a boy who loved the wind and listened to the trees. One morning while searching for a lost lamb, he stumbled upon a strange tree, tall, white-rooted, its bark smooth like skin. It seemed to hum, though there was no wind. Beneath it the ground was soft, unnatural. Curious, Asahel dug. His fingers touched metal. Hours passed. Sweat clung to his skin. The sun faded. Then at last he pulled from the earth a chest, bronze, ancient, sealed with 3 emblems: a hand, a tower, and a lamb. He did not understand the symbols, but when he touched the lid, a word rose in his heart. Elipha. He spoke it aloud. The chest opened. Inside, the scrolls remained intact, preserved by divine hand. Symbols danced on their surfaces, some bright, others dim, and a few marked in red. Asahel couldn't read, but the moment he touched the first scroll, he understood, not by knowledge, by spirit. That night he dreamed. In his dream, he stood in a great garden filled with light. Trees bore fruit that glowed. Rivers laughed like children. Birds sang in harmonies he'd never heard. And at the center stood a man, not old, not young, robed in white, his eyes like dawn. The man smiled. "You have found my voice," he said. Asahel fell to his knees. "Who are you?" The man touched Asahel's shoulder and replied, "I am the Word that was with God. I am the Word that was God. I walked in Eden with Adam, and I will walk again in the hearts of men." Asahel wept. The man lifted him. "You must guard the tongue," he said. "Speak only the words that give life. Seal away those that enslave. For every tongue has a tree, and every tree has both fruit and poison." Then he vanished, and Asahel awoke. In the years that followed, Asahel became known as the keeper. He taught only 3 words from the scrolls: Alipha, beginning; Raphanah, healing; and Zerah, seed. Wherever he walked, crops flourished, wounds mended, and broken families embraced again. He never spoke the red words. He never returned to the cave. But he built a school near the valley of Heth, not to teach power, but to raise people in humility. And before he died, he wrote, "The tongue of Eden is not man's to own. It is a gift, not a weapon. One day when the earth is ready, the gardener will return, and the word will walk with us again." And so it was. The language spoken by Adam, lost in the fall, sealed in stone and scroll, hidden through fire and temptation, found by a boy with no name in the world, lived again, not in the mouths of kings, but in the heart of the humble.